History is just packed with terrible, awful, no good decisions. Trying to list them all is impossible, but we're going to try. Today, we're diving into some of history's biggest blunders, weirdest myths, and most baffling mysteries. Let's debunk a classic. The whole Napoleon complex? It's based on a lie. At 5 feet 6 inches, Napoleon Bonaparte was actually taller than the average Frenchman in the early 1800s. The image of a tiny, grumpy tyrant was cooked up by a British cartoonist named James Gilray as wartime propaganda. Speaking of tyrants, Hitler was a deeply superstitious man who trusted horoscopes. British intelligence found out and hired an astrologer to create fake doomsday predictions. These bogus horoscopes were fed to Hitler's inner circle, shaking their confidence and fueling their paranoia. The Allies literally used psychological warfare based on the stars. Think the Wright brothers invented flight all on their own? Not quite. 9 years before their famous flight, an Australian inventor named Lawrence Hargrave was suspended 16 feet in the air by a rig of box kites. It just goes to show, the biggest names in history were often standing on the shoulders of forgotten pioneers. We all know the ancient Egyptians revered cats, but they took it to a whole other level. It was common for people to be buried with a mummified version of their most beloved pet cat. I guess some things never change. We all want our furry friends with us, even in the afterlife. During the American Civil War, the Union made one of its worst decisions by putting James Wolfe Ripley in charge of weaponry. He insisted on using outdated, poorly performing rifles because he thought newer models were too expensive. He even refused to buy surplus British rifles out of a misplaced sense of patriotism, allowing the Confederates to snatch them up and crush Union forces in early battles. Charles Lindbergh's solo flight across the Atlantic is legendary, but he wasn't the first to cross by air. That honor goes to a 6-man crew of naval pilots who flew a Curtiss flying boat named the NC-4 in 1919. It took them 24 days with multiple stops, but they got there first. You can probably blame Pope Gregory IX for some of today's anti-cat sentiment. In the 13th century, he issued a papal bull, declaring that cats were associated with Satan. This led to a mass extermination of cats across Europe, which some historians believe actually helped the bubonic plague spread faster, since there were fewer felines to hunt the disease-carrying rats. In 1857, the British made a clueless decision that sparked a rebellion. They issued Indian troops new rifles that required soldiers to bite open cartridges greased with animal fat. The problem? The fat came from either pigs, which are unclean to Muslims, or cows, which are sacred to Hindus. This massive cultural blunder led directly to the bloody Sepoy Rebellion. Let's clear this up. Einstein did not fail math. He was a certified whiz at math as a teenager. He wasn't great at every subject, like zoology and botany, but in his chosen field of physics and mathematics, he was brilliant from a young age. Did Russia drink itself dry? When World War II ended, the world erupted in celebration, but in Russia, the party reached legendary proportions. The story goes that after Victory Day in 1945, the entire nation celebrated so hard that they completely drank the Soviet Union out of vodka. It's a fantastic tale that captures the sheer joy and relief of the moment. However, while production was low and the drinking was epic, there's no proof the nation actually ran dry. It's one of history's greatest party legends, but as a literal fact, it's a myth. The Victorian beauty industry had a crazy secret. In the late 1800s, American newspapers openly advertised something called arsenic complexion wafers. These dainty little tins promised flawless porcelain skin. Freckles, pimples, and blemishes would supposedly vanish. And they worked, but at a horrific cost. The key ingredient was arsenic, a lethal poison known even then for causing organ failure, hair loss, and death. Manufacturers didn't even try to hide it. The word arsenic was printed right on the label, as if it were a feature, not a warning. Yet countless women still bought them. Desperate to meet society's brutal beauty standards, slowly poisoning themselves for the sake of perfect skin. Imagine being a spy and making this mistake. In 1915, a German diplomat funding a spy ring in America fell asleep on the New York subway. When the train stopped suddenly, he bolted off, leaving behind his briefcase packed with incriminating documents. A Secret Service agent who was tailing him snatched it up. The U.S. leaked the files to the press. This turned public opinion against Germany and helped push America closer to entering World War I. You've probably heard the story of Orson Welles' 1938 War of the Worlds radio broadcast causing nationwide panic. It's a great story, but it's mostly a myth. Research shows that the audience was actually pretty small, and only a tiny fraction of them believed the alien invasion was real. The ancient Egyptians believed onions could ward off evil spirits. They even placed onions in the eye sockets of the deceased for protection in the afterlife. Maybe Shrek was onto something with that whole onions have layers thing. Here's a huge missed opportunity. The Dutch landed in Australia way back in 1606, more than 150 years before Captain Cook. They mapped parts of the coast and even named it New Holland. But they never bothered to claim it. No flags, no settlements. So when Cook arrived in 1770, he planted a British flag, and the rest is history. This one is a double mystery. In 1947, James Tedford came home from his military service to find that his wife Pearl had vanished. She was last seen walking to the store. 2 years later, James himself vanished from a moving bus while traveling through the same area. 14 other passengers saw him sleeping in his seat. But when the bus arrived at its destination, he was gone, though all his luggage remained. Did you know that weddings were once a battle plan? Forget meet cute. Marriage was originally an operation for survival. Ancient customs reveal that weddings were less about affection and more about preventing a kidnapping. The celebration itself was often a defensive tactic, evolving from the very real threat of bride abduction. Bridesmaids were body doubles. That picture-perfect line of matching dresses? Pure deception. These women weren't just for moral support. They were decoys, dressing exactly like the bride to confuse kidnappers or malevolent entities like evil spirits. In fact, they were the original anti-theft system for a human asset. The best man was the groom's warrior. The word best didn't refer to friendship. It referred to his proficiency with a blade. The first best men were chosen based on their strength and sword-fighting skills, ready to fend off rival suitors or a bride's disapproving family. He was the armed guard, standing ready to fight to the death to secure the marriage. The veil wasn't always romantic. This delicate lace was once a heavy-duty camouflage, a visual shield for protection. In ancient times, a bridal veil was used to hide the bride from jealous spirits who might curse her, or jealous humans who might try to snatch her. It stayed down, concealing her face until the marriage contract was legally sealed and she was safely owned. Carrying the bride. was protective, not playful. The iconic walk over the threshold had a deeply superstitious purpose. A new bride was believed to be a prime target for curses and bad luck lurking on the ground of her new home. Carrying her, a feat of strength and coordination, by the way, was the groom's way of ensuring her feet didn't touch the floor and invite disaster. Marriage was once a battlefield. The modern fairy tale wedding is a deceptive masquerade hiding a chilling history. The whole ceremony was a strategic transaction, part defense, part economic merger, often involving significant wealth like a dowry, which could easily be $10,000 to $100,000, or a massive haul of livestock or property. Behind every vow, you can still hear the echoes of ancient fears: theft, loss, and the violent power struggle. Next time you garnish your food with parsley, remember this. The ancient Greeks and Romans used it to decorate grave sites. For them, it was a symbol of death and oblivion. Suddenly, that pasta doesn't look so appetizing, does it? The ancient Chinese practice of foot binding? You probably figure it was all about making women more attractive, but no pun intended. That wasn't the sole reason. Binding their feet also made them ideal for jobs like textile work, where they sat all day, letting them earn precious income for their families. Grim, but true. In 1964, a grad student made a decision he'd regret for the rest of his life. While studying a stubborn bristlecone pine, he became so frustrated trying to obtain a core sample that he convinced the U.S. Forest Service to simply cut it down. A week later, he discovered he had just killed Prometheus, the oldest living tree in the world, clocking in at over 5,000 years old. Ouch. Ever heard of the Nina? This 85-year-old racing yacht mysteriously vanished in 2013 during a trip from New Zealand to Australia. Despite one of the biggest maritime searches in the country's history, not a single trace was found. The creepy part? It disappeared in the Bass Strait Triangle, a body of water notorious for claiming ships. In 1140, King Conrad III was laying siege to Weinberg, a city located in southwest Germany. Back then, Weinsberg was part of the Holy Roman Empire. Before ordering the final assault, Conrad decided to spare the lives of all the women in the city. He allowed them to leave with whatever they could carry on their shoulders. The women left behind all their possessions and came out carrying their husbands. When Conrad saw this, all he could do was laugh and accept their clever subterfuge. Conrad remarked that a king should always keep his word. Today, the castle ruins still exist and are known as Weibertrue, wifely loyalty. A single catastrophic decision sealed the fate of General George Custer. At the infamous Battle of the Little Bighorn in 1876, he was offered a game-changing advantage: 3 brand-new rapid-fire Gatling guns. These precursors to the modern machine gun could unleash a storm of lead at hundreds of rounds per minute. But in a stunning move, Custer rejected the offer. His fatal logic? The heavy guns would slow his column down and ruin any element of surprise. He chose speed over overwhelming firepower. It was a disastrous miscalculation. Without that devastating advantage, Custer's 7th Cavalry was outmaneuvered and annihilated by Lakota Sioux, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors. He and his entire immediate command of over 250 men were wiped out. This blunder turned a planned attack into the legendary defeat known forever as Custer's Last Stand. This isn't fiction. This is the story of Lieutenant Alejandro Bello Silva. The year is 1914. A promising pilot in the Chilean Air Force is on a critical training flight to earn his military wings. Suddenly, His Sanchez Besa biplane veers off course and flies directly into a strange, dense cloud bank. And then, nothing. He was never seen or heard from again. It was as if the fog simply swallowed him and his aircraft whole. Extensive search parties found no wreckage, no debris, no trace of the pilot. The disappearance became so infamous in Chile that it literally changed their language. Today, when someone is completely and hopelessly lost, people say they are more lost than Lieutenant Bello. That iconic painting of George Washington crossing the Delaware? Mostly wrong. He wasn't standing heroically in a tiny rowboat. He and his men used massive 60-foot-long Durham boats. And it didn't happen on Christmas Eve. The crossing took place on the 25th and 26th of December. In the United Kingdom, the king holds a surprising title, Seigneur of the Swans. This royal prerogative dates back to the 12th century, when swans were a prized delicacy at banquets. The right was legally solidified in a landmark 1592 court case under Queen Elizabeth I. To this day, the Crown technically owns any unmarked mute swan in the open waters of England and Wales. And this isn't just a forgotten rule, it's an active tradition. Each year, a ceremony called swan upping is held on the River Thames to count the swan population. During the Gallipoli campaign in World War I, one of the worst decisions came down to a watch. Allied naval forces ended their bombardment 7 minutes early without synchronizing with the ground troops. The Turkish defenders used those 7 minutes to regroup. When the Australian soldiers charged, they ran straight into a hail of gunfire. More than half were killed or wounded in an instant. In 2014, a German man named Lars Mittank was on vacation in Bulgaria. After a fight, he ruptured his eardrum and had to stay behind while his friends went home. Alone and staying in a cheap hostel, he became terrified and paranoid, texting his mother that 4 men were following him. The last time he was seen, security cameras caught him sprinting out of the airport. Leaving all his luggage behind, he hopped a fence and disappeared into a nearby forest. He's known as the most famous missing person on YouTube. Picture this. London, May 20th, 1910. It's the funeral of King Edward VII. But this is no ordinary state affair. This was the largest gathering of European royalty ever recorded, all captured in one photograph. 9 reigning kings from Great Britain to Bulgaria stood shoulder to shoulder. They weren't just monarchs, they were family, a network of cousins and in-laws ruling a continent. The ultimate irony? This family portrait was taken just 4 years before they led their nations into the carnage of World War I. This single photograph marks the final, glittering moment before the old world of kings and empires vanished forever. In medieval Europe, the fear of the undead was terrifyingly real. They believed certain individuals, especially plague victims, were cursed to rise from the grave. But these weren't your typical vampires. They were grotesquely known as shroud eaters. To stop these revenants, they devised a truly grim and practical solution. Archaeologists have unearthed skeletons from this period, with rocks and bricks forcibly wedged into their jaws. The brutal logic was to physically block the corpse from chewing through its burial shroud and clawing its way out. This gruesome practice was their ultimate insurance against a real-life zombie apocalypse. In the grimy streets of Victorian England, your own pee could be a payday. That's right, human urine was a valuable commodity, bought and sold for industrial use. Tanneries needed the potent ammonia it contained to clean and soften animal hides. The poorest families would collect their urine and sell it just to survive. This grim trade is believed to be the origin of the phrase, piss poor. Those even more destitute were said to not have a pot to piss in. This meant they couldn't afford a simple chamber pot, a basic household necessity. Alcatraz was America's escape-proof prison, but three men proved that wrong. In 1962, Frank Morris and his brothers, John and Clarence Anglin, vanished from their cells. They brilliantly used sharpened spoons to dig through ventilation ducts. Of the 36 inmates who ever attempted to escape Alcatraz, they're the only ones never accounted for. Did they drown in the frigid waters of the San Francisco Bay? Or did they pull off the greatest prison break in history? Hollywood's Wild West of constant gunfights and saloon brawls is a myth. In reality, most frontier towns were surprisingly civilized. They had strict gun control laws, and murder rates were lower than in many modern cities. Iconic figures like Calamity Jane didn't die in a dramatic shootout. She died from pneumonia and complications from alcoholism. Most people were far more worried about disease, accidents, or starvation than dueling at high noon. Believe it or not, in the 1830s, ketchup wasn't a condiment. It was a cure. An Ohio physician named Dr. John Cook Bennett claimed it could treat indigestion, diarrhea, and even jaundice. He concentrated the recipe and began selling it as a tomato pill. This sparked a full-blown medical craze. Rival companies popped up, selling their own versions of solidified ketchup medicine. The craze eventually collapsed when people realized the pills, well, didn't do anything. But for a brief moment, ketchup was the hottest new wonder drug on the market. In 1840, the British Crown and Maori chiefs signed New Zealand's founding document, the Treaty of Waitangi. But there was a massive problem hiding in plain sight. The treaty was written in two languages, and the versions said two completely different things. The Maori translation promised they would retain chieftainship over their lands while granting governance. The English version, however, demanded they cede all rights and powers of sovereignty forever. This critical mistranslation led to decades of conflict and land loss. It remains one of the most controversial and debated translation failures in history. Let's time travel back exactly 100 years to see how 1925 imagined our world of 2025. They saw the future coming, correctly predicting wonders like video calls and at-home entertainment. Some even envisioned portable screens, foreseeing the essence of our modern tablets. But their crystal ball also had some hilarious blind spots. One popular theory predicted that by now, humans would have evolved to be entirely bald. They also expected personal airplanes to be as common as cars, with landing pads on every roof. They accurately foresaw what we'd have: instant global communication. But they completely missed the how: a planet-spanning network called the Internet. Pablo Picasso wasn't just an artist. He was an artistic revolution in one man. By his early teens, this Spanish prodigy had already mastered realistic painting. But his true goal was to unlearn it all, famously stating, "It took me 4 years to paint like Raphael, but a lifetime to paint like a child." This philosophy is perfectly captured in his 1945 lithograph series, The Bull. He plunged art into his blue period before co-founding the reality-shattering movement, Cubism. His colossal masterpiece, Guernica, became the world's most powerful anti-war symbol. Stretching nearly 3.5 meters, 11.5 feet, high and 7.8 meters, 25.6 feet, wide. Over his 91 years, Picasso never stopped reinventing art and himself. For a brief, glorious period, the ultimate test of strength was an Olympic sport. I'm talking about tug-of-war. From 1900 to 1920, nations battled it out by pulling on a rope. The rules were wild. countries could enter multiple teams. This led to the 1904 St. Louis Olympics, where the United States did the unthinkable. They swept the podium, winning the gold, silver, and bronze medals. Talk about a total victory. Marie Antoinette made one of history's worst getaway plans. While trying to flee the French Revolution, the royal family needed to be fast and discreet. Instead, the Queen insisted they travel in a massive, slow, and luxurious coach. It was the 18th century equivalent of escaping in a gold-plated limousine. This opulent parade drew suspicion at every turn, leading directly to their capture. That single decision didn't just end their escape. It sealed their fate at the guillotine. Could a stray dog actually start a war between two nations? In October 1925, on the tense border of Greece and Bulgaria, it did. It all ignited when a Greek soldier ran after his runaway dog into Bulgarian territory. Bulgarian sentries responded not with a warning, but with a fatal gunshot. Outraged, Greece invaded the Bulgarian town of Petrich, launching the Petrich Incident. This bizarre conflict is now famously known as the War of the Stray Dog. For 10 days, soldiers and civilians died until the League of Nations intervened. The shocking outcome? Greece was branded the aggressor and forced to pay reparations. Forget everything you saw in gladiator movies. The idea that every fight ended in death is a complete myth. Think of gladiators less as disposable pawns and more as prized athletes. They were incredibly expensive to train, house, and feed. Their owners had a massive financial incentive to keep them alive. Most gladiators received excellent medical care and fought only a few times a year. They were valuable investments, not cannon fodder. Abraham Lincoln was not only a brilliant president, but also a master of efficiency. His iconic stovepipe hat wasn't just a fashion statement, it was his personal filing cabinet. He famously tucked letters, notes, and even drafts of his powerful speeches inside its lining. While everyone else saw a tall silk hat, Lincoln saw a secure, portable office. It was the ultimate combination of style and substance. Presidential and profoundly practical. History is filled with dark irony, but this might be the most terrifying example. After World War I, Adolf Hitler's job in the German army was to be a spy. His mission: infiltrate and report on a tiny extremist group, the German Workers' Party. But instead of simply observing them, he became captivated by their ideology. He didn't just join the party he was assigned to destroy. He took it over, renamed it the Nazi Party, and changed the world forever. This is history's most catastrophic failure: to follow instructions. In a Mexican town, one man faced off against a ticking time bomb on wheels. On November 7, 1907, railroad brakeman Jesus Garcia was driving a train loaded with dynamite. Suddenly, sparks from the smokestack set the explosive cargo ablaze, threatening to obliterate the town of Nacozari. With only minutes to act, Garcia ordered his crew to jump off the moving train. He then slammed the throttle in reverse, driving the fiery locomotive away from the populated town. The train exploded 6 kilometers, nearly 4 miles away, taking his life instantly but saving hundreds of lives. The town was renamed Nacozari de Garcia in his honor, a permanent tribute to his sacrifice. He is now immortalized in Mexico as the hero of Nacozari. The man who really invented the telephone. We all learned that Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. But the history books got that one wrong. The real credit belongs to an Italian immigrant named Antonio Meucci. In 1849, he created a device to communicate with his paralyzed wife in another room. He filed a notice for a patent, but was too poor to pay the final fees. Years later, Bell, who had worked in the same lab, where Mucci's materials were stored, filed his own patent. Mucci sued, but sadly, he died before the verdict. Finally, in 2002, the U.S. Congress officially recognized Mucci as the true inventor. Ever dream of leaving it all behind for a deserted island? Meet Mauro Morandi, the man who actually did it, completely by accident. In 1989, Morandi set sail for the turquoise waters of Polynesia. But his catamaran's engine gave up just off the coast of Sardinia, Italy. He washed ashore on the breathtaking island of Budeli. He was so captivated by its pristine nature and its famous pink sand beach, Spiaggia Rosa, that he never left. Just as he arrived, he learned the island's caretaker was retiring. Seizing the moment, Morandi took the job and became Budeli's sole inhabitant. For the next 33 years, he was the island's guardian, protector, and only resident. He spent his days maintaining the trails, cleaning the beaches, and protecting the delicate ecosystem. He lived in a former World War II shelter, swapping the chaos of modern life for the rhythm of the tides. His story went viral, turning him into a global symbol of tranquility and escape. But in 2021, his idyllic life came to an end. The island was fully incorporated into the La Maddalena Archipelago National Park. And at 81 years old, after more than 3 decades of solitude, the authorities forced him to leave his home. A truly incredible story about a man who found his paradise where his journey broke down. In 1814, a bizarre industrial accident flooded a London neighborhood with beer. A massive vat at the Mew and Company brewery ruptured, containing over 570,000 liters, 150,000 gallons. The force of the explosion destroyed other vats, releasing a torrent of porter. A beer wave, reportedly 4.5 meters, 15 feet high, crashed through the streets. It smashed through homes in the poor St. Giles Rookery slum. 8 people drowned in the deluge. The brewery was taken to court, but the disaster was ruled an act of God. No one was held responsible for the deadly flood of ale. In 2010, experienced scuba diver Ben McDaniel descended into the Vortex Springs cave system. He bypassed a gate meant to keep people out of the cave's most dangerous depths. He was never seen again. An exhaustive search began, with expert recovery divers exploring every known passage. They searched for weeks, covering thousands of feet of treacherous underwater terrain. But they found absolutely nothing. Not a fin, not a tank, not a single trace of McDaniel. His body has never been located, leaving behind a chilling mystery. In 1853, the merchant ship Madagascar left Australia for London, loaded with a fortune. On board were passengers, wool, and over 2 metric tons, 4,400 pounds of solid gold. The ship never arrived. It vanished without a distress call. The most popular theory is a brutal mutiny. Pirates, posing as passengers, hijacked the ship in the dead of night. They murdered everyone on board, stole the gold, and scuttled the vessel. To this day, neither the wreck nor the immense treasure has ever been found. It remains one of the greatest unsolved maritime mysteries in history. You've probably heard the famous quote about Napoleon's defeat. The Battle of Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton. It perfectly captures the idea of British aristocratic grit. There's just one problem. The Duke of Wellington almost certainly never said it. The line first appeared in a book written years after the Duke's death. There is no record of him ever uttering the phrase during his lifetime. It's a classic case of history being rewritten to sound more poetic. A great line, but one that belongs to a storyteller, not a general. Joseph Stalin was one of history's most paranoid leaders. He was so obsessed with security that he forbade anyone from entering his bedroom uninvited. This obsession directly led to his death. One morning, after suffering a massive stroke, he collapsed onto the floor. His guards were too terrified of his rules and of him to check on him. For hours, they debated what to do, fearing execution if they entered without permission. By the time someone finally dared to go in, it was far too late. His own reign of terror ensured no one was brave enough to save him. In 1967, Australia's Prime Minister, Harold Holt, went for a swim at Cheviot Beach. He waded into the turbulent surf and was never seen again. What followed was one of the largest search and rescue operations in the nation's history. Navy divers, Army helicopters, and hundreds of volunteers scoured the coastline for days. They found nothing, not a trace. Theories exploded. Was he swept out to sea? Did he commit suicide? Or was he even kidnapped by a Soviet submarine? The Statue of Liberty is famous for its iconic green color. But that was never the plan. Her exterior is made of hundreds of thin copper sheets. When she was unveiled in 1886, she was the shiny brown color of a new penny. Her green color is actually a patina, a layer formed by the oxidation of copper over decades. So, Lady Liberty is essentially covered in a thin layer of decorative rust. Interestingly, for 16 years, her torch actually functioned as a real, working lighthouse. Its light could be seen from 39 kilometers, 24 miles away. In 1788, the Austrian army gave us history's most ridiculous friendly fire incident. A scouting party got drunk on the wine they bought from local merchants. When another Austrian unit arrived and demanded a share, a drunken brawl broke out. A shot was fired, someone panicked and screamed, "The Turks are coming!" and chaos erupted. Different parts of the Austrian army, unable to see in the dark, began firing on each other. An officer, thinking an attack was underway, even ordered his cannons to open fire. 2 days later, the actual Ottoman army arrived to find 10,000 Austrian casualties. They captured the camp without firing a single shot. On Christmas Eve 1945, the Sodder family home burned to the ground. George and Jenny Sodder escaped with 4 of their 9 children. They tragically believed their other 5 children had perished in the blaze. But when investigators searched the ashes, they found a chilling mystery. There were no bones, no teeth, not a single trace of the 5 missing children. The phone line had been cut, and the family's trucks were mysteriously disabled. Experts concluded the fire wasn't hot enough to completely destroy human remains. The children were likely kidnapped moments before the fire was set as a diversion. The truth about chivalry. Think of medieval knights, and you probably picture honor and chivalry. But the truth is far less romantic. The famous Code of Chivalry wasn't created to inspire nobility. It was invented to stop knights from acting like violent, uncontrollable thugs. The warrior class had a massive problem with amoral, brutal behavior. So the rules of honor were less about virtue and more about desperate damage control. It was a medieval attempt to put a leash on pure chaos. Alexander the Great conquered the known world, but his death is a chilling mystery. Modern research suggests a horrifying possibility. He may have suffered from a rare neurological disorder that caused total paralysis. Critically, he would have remained fully conscious and aware. Ancient doctors confirmed death by checking for breath, which would have been nearly invisible. So when they pronounced him dead, Alexander may have been wide awake, trapped inside his own body, unable to move, speak, or scream. He may have been buried alive. Meet Agustina de Aragon, a Spanish heroine of the Napoleonic Wars. During the brutal siege of Zaragoza in 1808, Spanish forces were faltering. When she saw a cannon crew killed, she ran forward, lit the fuse herself, and fired it at point-blank range. This single act of defiance shredded a wave of French attackers. Her bravery so inspired the retreating Spanish soldiers that they rallied and held the line. She was made a commissioned officer in the Spanish army, a rare honor for a woman. She wasn't a soldier, just a civilian, but became a symbol of resistance against Napoleon. Her legend lives on as Spain's Joan of Arc. You've been told that people in the Middle Ages thought the Earth was flat. That story is a complete and total myth. Educated people have known our planet was a sphere for thousands of years. In fact, the ancient Greeks had it all figured out. As early as 240 BCE, the scholar Eratosthenes calculated Earth's circumference. Using just sticks and shadows, he was accurate to within 2% of the real size. The planet's circumference is 40,075 kilometers, 24,901 miles, and he was right on the money. The idea of a flat Earth past was invented in the 1800s. Forget the image of Cleopatra as an Egyptian seductress. First, she wasn't Egyptian, she was Macedonian Greek. Her legendary beauty? That was mostly Roman propaganda to make her seem like a corrupting influence. Her true power wasn't her face, it was her formidable intellect. She spoke at least 9 languages, was a published author, and commanded navies. Her affairs with Caesar and Antony weren't just about passion, they were brilliant political alliances. Her greatest weapon was always her mind. She was a queen, a scholar, and a strategist, not just a pretty face. In 1999, NASA's $125 million Mars Climate Orbiter vanished as it neared the red planet. The cause wasn't a catastrophic failure or an alien attack. It was a shockingly simple math error. The engineering team at Lockheed Martin used imperial units, inches, feet, and pounds. But the navigation team at NASA used the metric system. This tiny conversion error went completely unnoticed. It sent the orbiter on a fatal trajectory, causing it to burn up in the Martian atmosphere. A monumental failure caused by the simplest of mistakes. We've all heard of the Dark Ages, a time of supposed ignorance and decline. But modern historians agree that name is completely misleading. Civilization didn't just stop after the fall of Rome. The term was coined by later scholars to make their own era seem more enlightened. In reality, this period saw crucial advancements in mathematics, engineering, and astronomy. Here's the biggest twist. The modern university system was actually born in this era. It wasn't an age of darkness. It was the dawn of a new world. Historically, Japan is home to the world's oldest company, Kongo Gumi. Kongo Gumi was a Japanese construction company founded in 578 AD to build Buddhist temples, and it was the world's oldest continuously operating company for over 1,400 years. While the company went out of business in 2006 and was absorbed by the Takamatsu Construction Group, its history highlights a long tradition of craftsmanship and family succession. The company was founded by an immigrant who was commissioned by Prince Shotoku to build the Shitennoji Buddhist temple, which is still standing. Today, Japan's history continues to be evident through its unique culture and ancient traditions that still influence modern life, like the code of the samurai, Bushido, still influences aspects of Japanese society today. For over 1,000 years, the ancestral Puebloans built spectacular cities carved into sheer cliffs. Then, around the end of the 13th century, they completely vanished. Entire communities abandoned their homes, leaving behind everything they had built. Historians point to a catastrophic drought and conflict as the logical cause. But ancient legends tell a different story, that the people were simply going home. This has fueled modern theories pointing to strange spiral petroglyphs at the sites. Were they just art? Or were they, as some believe, interdimensional stargates? What did America's first president do after leaving office? He became one of the largest whiskey distillers in the entire country. That's right, George Washington went from commander-in-chief to master of spirits. His distillery at Mount Vernon wasn't just a hobby. At its peak in 1799, it produced nearly 41,640 liters, 11,000 gallons, of whiskey a year. The founding father proved to be a brilliant businessman, turning a massive profit. Today, you can visit the rebuilt distillery and even buy replicas of his original recipe. The first U.S. president was also a first-class whiskey tycoon. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, was Germany's best weapon against an Allied invasion. His task was to defend the entire coast of France from the inevitable attack. On June 5, 1944, the weather forecast was abysmal. Convinced no invasion was possible, Rommel made a fateful decision. He flew home to Germany to surprise his wife for her birthday. Less than 24 hours later, the Allies launched the D-Day landings. With Rommel completely unreachable, the German command structure was paralyzed. One of history's most decisive battles was shaped by a last-minute birthday trip. We've all heard the story. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. But Christopher Columbus did not discover a new world. He landed in a very old world, already home to millions of people. His arrival marked not a discovery, but a catastrophic collision of continents. The most lethal weapons he and his crew brought were not swords, but germs. Diseases like smallpox and measles, to which native populations had zero immunity, swept the land. Historians estimate this led to the deaths of up to 90% of the indigenous population. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was one of the largest demographic collapses in human history. Imagine a single photograph from 1885 capturing a global shift in history. Three exceptional women, Anandabai Joshi from India, Kei Okami from Japan, and Sabat Islambouli from Syria, stood together. These trailblazers defied cultural and societal norms by earning medical degrees from the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania. At a time when higher education for women was practically non-existent, their determination was revolutionary. They were among the first women doctors from their respective nations, shattering glass ceilings with every scalpel and stitch. Their degrees prove that intellect and courage are truly universal, transcending all geographical borders. This iconic image remains a powerful, lasting testament to their shared global impact. The extinction level impact. Let's dive into the cataclysmic event that reset life on Earth, the Chicxulub impact. Forget that small crater in the video. The real Chicxulub crater is a colossal scar on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Formed about 66 million years ago, this event was not just big. It was a planetary disaster. The impact created a crater nearly 180 kilometers, 110 miles, wide, releasing the energy of billions of nuclear bombs. This collision hurled massive amounts of dust and sulfur into the atmosphere. Sunlight was blocked for months, leading to a catastrophic collapse of the global food chain. The ultimate consequence? The mass extinction of the dinosaurs and approximately 75% of all life forms on the planet. But here's the twist. This apocalypse cleared the slate, allowing mammals to flourish and ultimately paving the way for us. Prepare to be amazed by the sheer biological isolation of Madagascar, the planet's fourth largest island. More than 90% of the wildlife found there is endemic, meaning you won't find it anywhere else on Earth. This astounding biodiversity is all thanks to a geologic history stretching back over 88 million years, when the island separated from India and then Africa. The unique evolution of life resulted in over 14,000 plant species, with 80% of those being found only there. This includes the majestic, water-storing baobab trees, perfectly adapted for drought. Sadly, over 80% of its native forests have been lost to human activity, making it one of the world's most critical biodiversity hotspots. The sheer concentration of one-of-a-kind life forms on this island is a mind-blowing example of evolutionary power. Meet one of the rarest, strangest animals ever discovered, Stygiomedusa gigantea, the giant phantom jellyfish. Since its discovery in 1899, it's been spotted fewer than 130 times, despite having a worldwide distribution in the deep ocean. This ethereal giant haunts the midnight zone, thriving at depths between 1,000 and 6,600 meters, 3,300 and 21,650 feet, far beyond the reach of sunlight. Its bell-shaped body is a ghostly transparent spectacle, spanning nearly 1 meter, 3.3 feet, wide. But the truly wild part? Its 4 ribbon-like oral arms can trail for an unbelievable 10 meters, 33 feet. Unlike most jellyfish, it doesn't have traditional stinging tentacles. It uses its massive, striped arms coated in sticky mucus to trap prey. Each rare sighting of this creature reminds us how much of our own planet's incredible biodiversity remains a mystery. History has one lesson that leaders seem to forget. Never invade Russia in winter. Napoleon learned this the hard way. A century later, Hitler made the exact same mistake. On June 22, 1941, he launched Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion of the Soviet Union. He expected a quick victory, completely underestimating the brutal Russian winter. He also underestimated the sheer scale of the Soviet resistance. His blitzkrieg bogged down in mud, snow, and a bloody war of attrition. This catastrophic failure on the Eastern Front stretched his forces to the breaking point. It was the beginning of the end for the Third Reich. In 1958, Mao Zedong launched a plan to transform China into an industrial superpower. It was called the Great Leap Forward. In reality, it was a catastrophic leap into one of the worst famines in human history. Farmers were forced to abandon their fields to melt down scrap metal in useless backyard furnaces. Agricultural science was replaced with disastrous and unproven theories. The result was a total collapse of the food supply. An estimated 15 to 45 million people starved to death. It stands as a horrifying testament to the consequences of radical and misguided policy. In 1923, a chilling mystery supposedly unfolded in the Brazilian village of Rio Verde. The entire population of 600 people vanished overnight. Homes were found completely abandoned, with food still on the tables and belongings untouched. The only clues were a recently fired gun and a terrifying message scrawled on a school blackboard: "There is no salvation." It's a perfect ghost story that has spread across the internet for years. But with no official records or historical evidence, this tale is pure folklore. The Chernobyl disaster wasn't just an accident, it was a self-inflicted wound. On April 26, 1986, operators decided to run a safety test. To do this, they deliberately disabled critical safety systems, including the automatic shutdown mechanism. They ignored explicit warnings and pushed the reactor into a dangerously unstable, low-power state. They were violating their own safety checklist step by step. The result was a catastrophic power surge and two massive explosions. The very test designed to improve safety directly caused the worst nuclear disaster in history. Imagine dining at a lavish Renaissance feast. The elegant tablecloth in front of you isn't just for decoration. It also serves a much messier purpose. It was the giant communal napkin for the entire table. Guests would wipe their greasy hands and mouths directly on the tablecloth. Thankfully, it's one historical tradition that didn't stick around. Just think of the dry cleaning bill. In 1867, Russia sold the entire territory of Alaska to the United States. They saw the 1.7 million square kilometers, 663,000 square miles, as a useless frozen wasteland. The final price? A mere $7.2 million. That works out to less than 2 cents per acre. Russia thought it was unloading a liability, but it was the blunder of the century. Just a few years later, the Klondike Gold Rush began. America pulled hundreds of millions of dollars in gold from the land they bought for pennies. It remains one of the most lopsided deals in the history of the world. This is how one man's love literally moved a mountain. Meet Dashrath Manji, an Indian laborer who would become a legend. In 1959, his wife was gravely injured and died because a massive mountain blocked the road to the nearest hospital. Fueled by grief and a powerful resolve, Manji picked up a hammer and a chisel. He swore that no one in his village would ever suffer the same fate. For the next 22 years, he worked day and night, chipping away at solid rock completely alone. He carved a path 110 meters long, 360 feet, 9.1 meters wide, 30 feet, and 7.7 meters deep, 25 feet. His monumental effort reduced a grueling 55-kilometer, 34-mile journey around the mountain to just 15 kilometers, 9 miles. His work became a vital lifeline for his entire community. He is now famously known as the Mountain Man, a symbol of incredible perseverance. You've probably been told the Nile River is unique because it's the only one that flows north. That is a complete and total myth. While the Nile is the most famous, dozens of major rivers flow north. The St. John's in Florida, the Red River in the central U.S., and the Ob in Russia are just a few examples. Rivers flow from a higher elevation to a lower one, regardless of cardinal direction. The idea that up on a map means uphill has fooled people for generations. It's one of the most persistent and widespread geographical myths out there. So no, the Nile isn't breaking any laws of physics. In 18th century England, the most powerful status symbol wasn't a jewel or a painting. It was a pineapple. Importing the tropical fruit was incredibly difficult and expensive. Having one at your party was the ultimate sign of immense wealth and power. Most people didn't even eat them. They were just for show. In fact, you could actually rent a pineapple for an evening to impress your guests. It was the 18th century equivalent of renting a supercar for a night. This bizarre trend made the pineapple a symbol of royalty and aristocracy. The story of Betsy Ross sewing the first American flag is an iconic piece of U.S. history. George Washington himself supposedly asked her to create the famous Stars and Stripes. There's just one problem. It almost certainly never happened. The story was first told by her grandson nearly 100 years after the event. There is zero historical evidence or documentation from the time to support it. Most historians agree the flag's likely designer was Francis Hopkinson. He was a member of the Continental Congress and a signer of the Declaration of Independence. The beloved story of Betsy Ross is a patriotic legend, not a historical fact. In 1925, legendary British explorer Percy Fawcett marched into the Amazon rainforest. He was searching for a fabled ancient metropolis he called the Lost City of Z. Fawcett, his son Jack, and their friend Raleigh Ramel ventured into uncharted territory. After one final dispatch, all three men vanished without a trace. Over the next several decades, more than a dozen rescue expeditions were launched. An estimated 100 people have died or disappeared while looking for Fawcett's lost party. No sign of the men or their camp has ever been found. Their fate remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of modern exploration. Meet Virginia Hall, one of the most dangerous Allied spies of World War II. After losing her lower leg in a hunting accident, she used a prosthetic. She nicknamed Cuthbert. Working for British and American intelligence in occupied France, she was relentlessly hunted by the Gestapo. They called her the Limping Lady and considered her their most wanted agent. She organized resistance networks, armed fighters, and reported on German troop movements. On one daring escape, she trekked 80 kilometers, 50 miles, over the frozen Pyrenees Mountains. She even learned to use Cuthbert's hollow space to hide secret messages and radio parts. Virginia Hall became the only civilian woman to receive the Distinguished Service Cross. Here is one of history's greatest and most painful ironies. We know who invented the telephone and the light bulb, but the true inventor of the modern fire hydrant is a complete mystery. Why? Because the U.S. Patent Office burned to the ground in 1836. The massive blaze destroyed all records from the preceding decades. This included the patent for the very device designed to fight fires. While an engineer named Frederick Graff Sr. is often credited, we can never be certain, as the proof was consumed by flames. Forget guard dogs. One prison in Brazil employs a more feathered security force. They use a flock of geese nicknamed Ganstelligents to patrol the prison's perimeter. These birds are incredibly territorial, have exceptional hearing, and are extremely loud. But this isn't a new idea. It's a security tactic that's over 2,000 years old. In 390 BCE, the sacred geese of Rome's Capitoline Hill famously foiled a surprise attack by the Gauls. The stealthy invaders managed to sneak past the Roman guards and even the sleeping dogs. But they couldn't sneak past the geese, whose frantic honking awakened the defenders and saved the city. This timeless effectiveness was even used to guard Ballantine's whiskey distillery in Scotland for over 50 years. They are a low-tech, high-volume alarm system that can't be bribed or disabled. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the oldest solutions are the most effective. In 2005, a voice actress named Susan Bennett took a mysterious recording job. For 4 hours a day, every single day for a month, she read nonsensical phrases into a microphone. She had absolutely no idea what the project was for. Those recordings were secretly being stitched together by a tech company for a top-secret project. That company was Apple, and they were building the voice for a revolutionary new feature. 6 years later, in 2011, she got an email from a friend. He had just bought the new iPhone 4S and immediately recognized her voice. It was Siri, Apple's brand new digital assistant. Without ever knowing it, she had become one of the most recognizable voices on the planet. In 2008, a Russian man named Dmitry Argarkov received an unsolicited credit card offer. Instead of throwing it out, he did something audacious. He rewrote the contract. He scanned the document and changed the terms to 0% interest, no fees, and no credit limit. He then signed his version and mailed it back to Tinkoff Bank. In a colossal blunder, The bank approved and signed the altered contract without reading it. When the bank finally realized its mistake and sued him, a judge sided with Argerkov. The court ruled that the legally binding contract was the one the bank had signed. Argerkov then countersued the bank for 24 million rubles for not honoring his terms. Imagine your plane is landing, but you look out the window to see nothing but water. On November 22, 1968, that's exactly what happened to Japan Airlines Flight 2. The massive Douglas DC-8 jet completely missed the runway. It accidentally touched down in San Francisco Bay, 4 kilometers, 2.5 miles, short of the airport. Miraculously, not a single one of the 107 people on board was seriously injured. When asked what happened, the captain gave the calmest response in history. "As you can see, I landed in the bay." After 55 hours in salt water, the plane was hoisted out of the water. And here's the twist. It was repaired, returned to service, and flew for another 15 years. As the RMS Titanic sank, one passenger sent a final, impossible message. 19-year-old Jeremiah Burke from Ireland scribbled a heartbreakingly simple note. "From Titanic, goodbye all, Burke of Glanmire, Cork." He sealed it in his mother's holy water bottle and threw it into the freezing Atlantic. It was a 1 in a billion shot at a final farewell. A full year later, that exact bottle washed ashore on a beach in Ireland. In an incredible twist of fate, it was found just a few miles from his family home. That impossible message, which traveled across the ocean, is now a treasured museum artifact. Napoleon Hill wrote one of the most influential success blueprints in history, Think and Grow Rich. His entire philosophy was supposedly built on a secret mission from industrialist Andrew Carnegie. The task? Spend 20 years interviewing over 500 of the world's most successful people. He claimed to have distilled the secrets of titans like Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, and Alexander Graham Bell. His conclusion was a powerful formula. Our thoughts, backed by desire and persistence, shape our reality. He called this the mastermind principle, the key to unlocking immense achievement. His book has sold over 100 million copies and inspired generations. However, historians have found no verifiable evidence that his foundational meeting with Carnegie ever happened. What is the most complex word in the English language? You might think it's a long scientific term. But the champion of complexity is a simple 3-letter word, run. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, it holds the all-time record, with a staggering 645 different meanings and still counting. You can run a race, run a business, or run a fever. A politician can run for office, a stocking can have a run, and a river can run dry. No other word in the English language works quite so hard. 6 weeks after their wedding, First Lieutenant Billy Harris was shot down over France in 1944. For the next 70 years, his wife Peggy searched relentlessly for the truth about his death. What she didn't know was that an entire French town had honored him as a hero for decades. As his plane went down, Billy heroically steered it away from the village of Les Vents, saving everyone. He crashed into the woods, sacrificing himself for people he had never met. The grateful villagers tended his grave, held annual processions, and even named a street after him. After a lifetime of searching, Peggy finally learned the full, heroic story of the man she married. Imagine getting vaccinated without a single needle. In the 1960s, this wasn't science fiction. It was the jet injector. This device used a microscopic, high-pressure blast of liquid to pierce the skin. It could vaccinate a person in seconds, a game changer for fighting smallpox and polio. But this medical marvel came with a price. It often left a distinctive circular scar that millions of people still carry today. Worse, improper sterilization created a serious risk of cross-contamination. By the 1980s, the era of the high-pressure shot was largely over. What if you could guarantee a profit from a state lottery? A retired mathematician discovered a brilliant loophole in the Massachusetts cash windfall game. The secret was a special rule called a roll-down. When the main jackpot went unclaimed, the prize money was redistributed to smaller winners. So he waited for these specific weeks and bought hundreds of thousands of tickets. He didn't need to win the big jackpot. The odds were now stacked in his favor. The sheer volume of his smaller wins guaranteed a 10 to 20% return on his investment. Over 9 years, his syndicate legally grossed nearly $8 million before the state finally closed the loophole. In medieval Romania, unhappy couples couldn't just get a divorce. The village of Bierton had a more radical solution: the marriage prison. Couples wanting to separate were locked together in a tiny church room for weeks. Inside, they were forced to share absolutely everything. Just one bed, one chair, one plate, and even one single spoon. The goal was simple: learn to work together or live in shared misery. Local legend claims this intense therapy was incredibly effective. In over 300 years, only a single divorce was ever recorded in the community. You can still visit this bizarre marital reconciliation room today. As the fortified church of Bierton, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Today, the room is preserved and shown to visitors as an example of Transylvanian Saxon social customs. Before the invention of radar, how did armies detect incoming enemy aircraft? They didn't use their eyes, they used giant mechanical ears. Known as acoustic locators or war tubas, these were humanity's first anti-aircraft systems. Massive horns, some over 6 meters, 20 feet, wide, were aimed at the sky to capture sound. They could amplify the faint drone of an engine up to 24 kilometers, 15 miles away. An operator would listen through tubes, swiveling the horns to pinpoint the plane's direction. It was a brilliant, if bizarre, acoustic early warning system. But this strange technology became obsolete almost overnight. The development of radar instantly made these giant listening devices a relic of the past. We picture Spartans as nothing but brutal, humorless warriors. But that stereotype misses the full story. While their agog training was famously harsh, it wasn't just about combat. Young Spartan boys were also taught singing, dance, and poetry. But the biggest shock comes from the status of Spartan women. While other Greek women were hidden away, Spartan women were trained to be seen. They competed in their own public athletic games, including running and wrestling. Even more, they could legally inherit and own property. At its peak, Spartan women personally owned nearly 40% of all land in Sparta. And that was just a glimpse into the wildest corners of our past. History isn't dusty, it's alive, bizarre, and packed with secrets waiting to be uncovered. Which fact blew your mind the most? Tell me in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories from history's hidden pages. I proudly present a big thank you to all of you, your thoughts, corrections, and suggestions. They help make every video sharper and better. I'm grateful for this community, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. And as always, stay safe, stay curious, and see you in the next video.